Hi guys, welcome back to Perception Paradox. My name is Zivile and I'm your host. And yeah, that's the show where we question the things we think we already understand. And here is the paradox for today. So the smarter our machines get, the more our humanity becomes the thing that actually matters. And my guest has lived on both sides of that line. Ted Yang is an MIT engineer who was studying AI 30 years ago, long before any of us were talking about it, and a self-described recovering hedge fund guy. He's founded more than a dozen companies, and his book, Ageless Peak Performance, makes a refreshing case that AI isn't here to replace you or steal your job. It's a tool we built, and the real question is how we use it to become more human, not less. We met a few weeks back at South Summit, and in this conversation, we get into what's genuinely worth optimizing in your life and what you should never hand to a machine. Why writing too well is suddenly a liability, how Ted uses AI to write his own book, and why, in a world of endless screens, he still believes that the most powerful technology in the room is two people talking face to face. Let's dive in. Real people, real stories, and real challenges that break the status quo. I'm your host, Zivile, and welcome to Perception Paradox. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Perception Paradox. And today I have with me Ted Yang, with whom we met a couple of weeks back at South Summit. So Ted, welcome, finally.
Hey, how are you? How are you? Yes, it's a little while since South Summit, and obviously a little bit further away from each other, but good to see you.
Good to see you too again. We've just touched base on the conference frequency and recovery and energy. So have you recovered after your week away from home and being in the
Uh,
high energy environments?
yes and no, right? Yes and no, because when you come home for a little bit of time away and see, I'm in New York based, so when I go to Europe, it takes a little bit more time to get out there. I come back and there's always a lot to deal down here. So when you come back home, it's good on one front to kind of recover a little bit, but on the other hand, there's just a lot of stuff waiting for you, right? So
Yeah,
that's
it's
good.
always like
Yeah.
that. It's not only
Mhm.
fun and great dinners and networking. There's always the backlog.
Right.
So Ted,
Yes.
maybe for everyone who is listening to us today, what kind of hat are you wearing right now? Because if we go and look for you online, right, you've been wearing so many multiple hats, from masters at MIT to having this title of recovering hedge fund guy and so on. So how do people know you in the last few months?
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, it's funny because you just reminded me that I have that recovering. I probably have to change that, right? Because it's been almost 15 years. So I think at that time I might be recovered. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Well, maybe, it's kind of like as when I hit as many years in as I have out, then maybe I can say then I'm done. But so the thing I spend the most time now is my book. It's the red one right behind you with the yin yang symbol, which is, of course, that's my name, so it's very clever. But anyway, which is called Ageless Peak Performance, and it's about using AI as humans and using as a tool to make yourself perform better. And I'm out there constantly talking, as that's where we met, of course, in South Summit and other places. And just last night, I was at another event that we had for the book, just talking about AI, meeting people, hopefully selling a few copies, but really just getting the word out there and really pushing the narrative of understanding how humans work with AI, because so much of the press and so much of even conferences is filled with tech, and it's filled with here's all the things that it can do, and then people start getting worried about what's going to happen to my job and what's going to happen to me, where am I going to go, when really that focus I think is completely wrong, because it really should be we built this tool, humans built this tool, we should talk about how we can use this for ourselves rather than taking advantage of other humans and getting rid of jobs and things like this, which tends to suck up all of the narrative that people hear. So I spend most of my time in service of that, whether it's doing podcasts or whether it's traveling and speaking at conferences or what have you.
Amazing. So what can we actually optimize in our lives in the current stage of available technology then?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that we talked about what's difficult to optimizing scheduling, right? And specifically, I meant here trying to schedule when you've got to travel and you do events and these kinds of things. And really, it's because humans are in the loop and humans have so much going on. And what I was saying is that, some people are using AI. I mean, I use AI to help my scheduling, but until everyone has something completely working for them all the time, thinking about it, right, getting your head together, then these things are just going to happen because, if people get late, people get delays, people get sick, all these kinds of things happen, and then the ripple effect is so huge, right? So I spent way too much time sorting out and trying to figure out exactly the complicated nature of getting travel and these kinds of things working right. It's just one of those things, right? I think we all do, right? I mean, you're on the road a lot too, so it takes way too much time. So and I can't figure out a way that we can use AI to solve this just yet, but stay tuned.
Oh, but I keep seeing like lots of different solutions, but it's still for me the best way to put my schedule in order. It's like the paper and the pen because I need to understand, okay, I'm going to be there on Friday, then I need to find myself on the other side on Monday. How do I do that? It's just like
Yeah,
no matter what, which is most convenient for me. Do I want to sacrifice sleep or I would like to get in early in the morning? Like all those things.
right.
But okay, but besides that, so how did you get into all this AI optimization and to the first place? And how did it change your maybe daily routines and life? Because that's all the
Yeah.
we all curious, right? How can we optimize? But do we really need to optimize everything?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, that's well, look, first how I got into this. I mean, so look, I'm an MIT engineer. I love technology. I've always loved technology. Interestingly, I studied AI way back when 30 years ago, and a lot of the same techniques that people are using today are the same techniques that they developed way back when. I mean, a lot of the technology people think, oh, it's brand new. It's not brand new, right? Like neural networks, these things are ancient. They've been around for decades and decades, like 50 years, right? Not even like 20 years, okay? And back then, when people were coming up with this, they didn't have the compute power, they didn't have the data, they didn't have the networks, but we do now. And so now look at the amazing things that we see, but a lot of the techniques are actually quite old. So that's interesting, right? So I've been interested in this for a long time, but more recently, I've been more interested in the human AI aspect. Like that's the newer part of what I've been doing, right? It's not just about cool functionality. And in fact, last night, again, I was at an event speaking about the book, and it comes up because that's what people want to talk about, right? People want to talk about how does it impact me? And one of the things that came up was, listen, you guys keep inventing, you guys, technology people, keep inventing new. But you know what? We're so bad at actually integrating this into our daily lives and in a way that actually makes us feel good and human, right? Just look at social networks, right? That just destroys our humanity. It really makes most people feel awful, frankly, most days, right? And this is like the state of the art thing that's making billionaires and trillionaires now. Like, come on, right? We keep doing this to ourselves, and why, right? And so I've gotten much more interested in the last few years, partly as I've gotten older as well. And thinking about, hey, look, this is a tool, but why are we doing it like this? Like, why can't we do something with this that's going to be about making ourselves better, that can maybe be a little bit even more humane, to use that word too much, right? But that's really what got me interested and where I've been focused on. That got me to write the book, and now got me to speak about the book.
That's amazing. That's very inspiring. I love this aspect of you, human as well. For me, I find that when it comes to all the different tools being released every hour, every minute, basically, and then there are quite some people reaching out, oh, do you want to try this one, especially when it comes to podcasting or content? And I'm like, but I already have this tool. It kind of saves my time. I'm also like, have a good mix and match, of creativity and optimization. Like, it's working. Why do I need to more over optimize it to lose the sense of human touch,
Yeah.
which like
Yeah.
removes authenticity completely?
It totally does. I mean, this is the interesting part where a bunch of stuff came out now about how emails and people are putting errors back into their emails deliberately, because if you see an email that's too well crafted, you immediately think it's generated by AI, right? And I do that too, right? I mean, like you, like everybody, I get all sorts of emails from God knows so many people pretending that they know me, right? And you can see right away, it's like, well, there's no human that I know writes like this. Okay, no one takes the time to write like this. This is obviously written by AI, which is unbelievable, right? Because I like writing, honestly. Obviously, I wrote some books. I actually own a local news outlet full of writers right? Which is very interesting for an MIT guy. But I'm very involved in the world of writing, and I actually like the fact that I write pretty well. But now this is like a liability because it's like, oh my God, you have like interesting vocabulary, and you want to, you write without making stupid grammatical mistakes. Well, you're obviously a bot. And they're like, oh, geez, come on,
Wow. So
ridiculous.
your recent book, so how much did it have AI involved, or how did AI help you to
Yeah,
optimize your time and research? And did you use it for some fact checks, for example,
absolutely,
before the
absolutely.
reels?
Absolutely. Right. So yeah, to the topic of optimization, maybe over optimization. So interestingly, in a very meta way, I put the book, how I wrote the book in the book. Right. So there you go. But how I wrote the book is very interesting because it does, of course, is a use of AI. So absolutely, I used AI for research. I used it for helping me develop ideas. I used it for fact checking. I used it for proofreading, right, and that kind of stuff, and absolutely, I did that, and I also used it because I dictated a lot of the book as my first draft, right? So I would dictate my ideas, and then I would ask AI to organize my ideas into a cohesive framework that I could then say, oh, all right, and let's move this around, let's put these into different chapters, and like get this into the writing stage, and then I rewrote it, right? So, but in order to get the kind of juices flowing to really get things going, and then yeah, I mean, look, I think using AI for these kinds of things is not even so much optimization as it is working with the tool to make yourself perform like in a much more interesting and better way, right? You have the ability to really think, I think, in an expanded fashion if you use it. No different than having a buddy, right? Like calling a friend and saying, look, I'm stuck. Like, help me on this, right? Give me some ideas. Like, I'm stuck. Give me some ideas, right? Or, oh, this doesn't sound quite right. Can I rephrase this in a different way? And like, yeah, of course it can do that, right? Now, if you just say yes, right, and you turn your brain off, then you get yourself into really big trouble, certainly as an author, but even as a human. But the idea of relying on it as a way to improve, right, rather than optimize, I would say just to improve the way in which you think and operate. Yeah, absolutely. And I absolutely used it for the book.
I love it, and Ted, I love the fact that you're mentioning how much you use your voice to text to talk actually with the tools. I think that's one of the features we kind of keep forget using
Mm,
and benefiting from, including myself. Sometimes I forget. I think it's just the best form of putting that information, brainstorming, and getting into
yeah,
the clusters what you need most of it, and getting in-depth research then way quicker than you are googling for it or going the
totally.
really old ways. That's amazing.
Totally. I mean, look, I type fast. That's not the problem. But when I type, I'm editing myself. When you talk, you're
Hmm.
just going, right? And I think that really, it's much more good, much more good. Jesus Christ, I can't even talk anymore. So it's much better for improving your ability, I think, to be creative, right? Is when you're really just going and you're as being as unfiltered as you can, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting thing that maybe people don't use too much, but there are, of course, hundreds of different tools that will help you do this. But I just use ChatGPT. ChatGPT is really actually very good at voice dictation, right? So some of the other ones are not as good, but ChatGPT is actually quite good. So as part of my subscription, I just use it, and I just use it as dictation. Even if I'm using Claude, I will dictate it into ChatGPT because it captures it very fast. So anyway, there you go.
Okay, before we get into the book and this whole current publishing landscape, how many subscriptions do you own when it comes to AI tools?
God, I don't know. It depends on the day, right? It depends on the day. But actually, not as many as you might think, right? Because I've rigorously pruned it down. I would say less than five, okay? Because I figure out what tools I want, and then I stop using them if I don't get the value, or I shift down on the plan if I have to stop using them, right? So I have the big ones, of course, and then for the smaller ones, I try it, I don't use it. I think this is what we talked about a little bit earlier. There's so many tools, right? And there's so many different things. And like, are they really, really that valuable? And like sometimes, and this is actually, of course, there's a privacy concern when you use the free tier of things. Sometimes I'm just okay with the free tier of things, not because necessarily I don't want to pay or I do want to pay, but because I almost feel like if I pay, I have an obligation to want to go use the tool more and maybe overuse the tool, right? That sometimes you just overuse something because you're like, oh, well, this is something I want to get some value out of this, right? So it's just like, oh, I pay for Netflix, I might as well just watch it. Like, geez, really? Let me just sit in front of your TV. So, but this is what people think about, right? So at least I think about it, right? So like, you know what? I try to be very rigorous about this because I don't want just this kind of tool glut that sticks in my head.
Somehow that doesn't work with some gym memberships.
Ah, that is funny. And actually, the book actually covers this, right? Because I work out every day. Like after this, I'm going to the gym, right? And
Same.
yeah, and it's so good, right? Like for people like us who are on the road, who are doing a lot of thought work or whatever. Like it's a game changer, to really go do this. Like for the longest time, okay, COVID, right? But I go work work out in my basement. It's not the same, right? You got to getting yourself someplace else and like being around other people who are also working out. It's like, oh man, I gotta get going here. So anyway, but interesting, like you talk about optimization, right? Just to get back on that topic. So one of the things that I put about in the book is like optimizing my workout routine. And this isn't because I'm trying to like get really ripped or whatever. Like this is not so much the point. It's really more of I'm trying to manage my time in an interesting way, but I still want to make sure I'm like staying true to my concept of like trying to hit different body groups, work on muscle groups in my body, etc. Right. And do that. And AI is actually pretty good at this kind of stuff, like dynamically moving things around and being like, hey, by the way, like, what did you do today? So, in the process of just basically logging what I do, it can help optimize what I do. And in this case, I think the optimization is really, really helpful, right? I'm not one of these people that can keep in my head like, oh, well, today I need to go, do this. I need to go do that exercise. Like, no, you know what? Like, help me out a little bit here would be very useful. So,
I love
this is
it.
a situation.
Well,
Yeah.
what resonates with me, like I always, for example, found it challenging when you have different workout routines, and I'm more into this workout play fun, like I don't know, from tennis to surf to some maybe horse riding, to have a mix and match, and then some strength. But then sometimes it's just so hard to understand the amount of nutrition and fuel you need for your body. So for me, when AI became accessible and really fast operating, that became one of the ways to actually optimize the right amount of nutrition. So I don't undereat or overeat too much because I've done this or that. So I think it's a game changer for
Yeah.
really eliminating some kind of unnecessary thinking in a way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because the whole point is you want to make it so you don't think, right? That's actually one of the principles in my book. Like you want to get it to a point where you don't think about this. And
Hmm.
no matter how good any tool is, it's kind of clunky because it's not built for you. And like the one of the things about AI is it's really customized to you. You could, or it certainly seems like it is, and you can make it much more customized to your situation, right? And for something like working out and eating, it's pretty intimate, right? Like it's like no interface is really going to capture exactly what I want to do, right? And so you're exactly right on this nutrition thing. Although I don't do it to the degree you do, and I really probably should, right? But I started to use some of these trackers, way back when of like, oh, here's an app for tracking. It's such a pain in the ass because it doesn't cover exactly what you're eating,
Never
and
worked
it's
for
not
me.
quite right. And then it's like that's a pain in the ass, and it's like, what am I doing here, right? Like that's really just not good. It's not. It doesn't. It becomes this extra work, and then of course, if it's extra work, like now it's like, am I really getting anything from it? Like I don't know. So I stopped using it, of course, right? So.
Same. That's quite funny. But so tell me, Ted, like what made you continue writing, or let's say write another book, and in such a hot and trendy topic where I would say the competitive landscape is kind of like a race
Yeah, a lot of people out
intense,
there.
and a lot of people are out there. Everyone is a thought leader. Why do you think it's different, your book, and what made you to go back to the
Yeah,
offer
yeah.
hat?
Well, again, we were just at South Summit, and there's probably 100 different speakers talking about something related to AI, right? So a couple things, right? Look, I have the credibility. Obviously, I'm an MIT engineer. I've done this. I've worked several careers. I've started a bunch of different companies. Short of someone actually who's worked at, and I have not, right? Like worked at Anthropic or Gemini. These things worked for these departments of the people who are building this. I have not done that. Okay. But I am much more credible, I think, on the aspect of if the applications of AI, certainly with regards to leadership and certainly with regards, again, to the human side of this, because I've been thinking about this for quite a long time, right? And again, quite a long time here is relative, right? So a couple of years is quite a long time in this space because it's so new, right? And to me, you talk about the differentiation. So I think that, again, the core differentiation is really the way in which I'm coming at the topic is much more accessible and is really about the human aspect of this. Right? I'm not trying to be technical. I'm not really saying, I'm not pontificating about the technology at all. I'm not really trying to even explain the technology within that way, in which you would see that so many different books are. I'm also not like coming at this of like I'm some crazy leadership guru of, go and do this, that, and the other thing. I'm really coming at this of look, we are people. We have, created and used tools our entire life. We also created this one, okay? Like as much people like to forget, it was made by people. And while it may be very complex and it's a completely different thing because it works on your cognition, it still is something that is made by people and therefore for the benefit of people. And so that angle is pretty different. I mean, you tell me. I mean, you see plenty of different conferences out there. I still go out there and there are people that are talking human AI. There are, right? There are institutes, there's more and more people that are talking about this, especially as we now start to hit not just job loss, but also limitations of people. People are trying to come to the grips of, oh my God, like this thing isn't just going to make my life miraculous. It's actually making my life harder. Why aren't people thinking about the human impact of AI? Well, okay, more people are thinking about that. So that's true. I do see some more people out there, but there's still few. And to me, it's still worth it to get it into a kind of book form and get people to really understand it. So that's why I'm out there.
And the print book form, so people can touch the book.
Touch it. I know. How crazy. How crazy. I mean, look, I have the Substack too, right? I'm on podcasts. I record our I have partners that together we both the Blue Book and the Red Book, the books that were released in the last year. And the reality of it is, I mean, we are on all these different types of media, but honestly, and this is interesting to me, there is still something authoritative, right? Even to people of like our age, okay, of something that's physical. And then of course, if you're older people, then the physical aspect is huge. And it's not just because you don't want to read it on a screen, although that's true for some people. It's really, you can take the same thoughts and put them together in a bound book, which, let's be honest, all that requires is formatting, and I send it off, right, to Amazon and they publish it, okay? There's nothing super magical about this. People like to think it's huge. Like, it's a pain, okay? It's a pain, but you just do it. It just works, right? But the point is, by doing that extra work, it suddenly becomes more authoritative and more, useful in terms of its ability to access people. Right. And so people who would, and I think this is especially true for certain, people, let's say 40, 50 or older, who don't have that innate nature of like, I'm going to go look online and I'm going to read something on Substack or Reddit, or I'm going to go watch some videos on like TikTok or Reels or whatever, and I'm going to learn this. No, they're not going to learn anything unless it's actually in their hands and they can touch it. Right. And so that's why I put it out as an actual book.
Amazing. I don't know. I'm a fan of books, to be honest. It allows us a bit to disconnect from all the online world we have that is constantly the screens and gives back. But I'm a passionate reader since I was a kid. So that's, again, very different audience.
Yeah, that's pretty different. I think that's pretty different, right? I mean, people... even before the AI stuff, people were saying, people's attention span keeps going down. And then obviously more recently, you have social media to thank for that, right? So
yeah. People shortening time spans everywhere, from the sport matches to the content, etc., which is quite wild.
It is crazy, right? It is crazy because like humans still operate at the speed of humans, right? And this goes back to like the why get out there and talk to people in person and the connection aspect that well, right? And we're actually talking about our friend who does even more out there all the time. But to me, like being out there at least to some extent, or even to a reasonable extent, is actually good because that's where the people are, right? They're not as much as fun as it is to do this with you. I mean, you and I have actually been together. Right, we've actually hung out together, which is different than the nature of other podcasts that I do, where I've never met that person in my life. I'll probably never will, right? Which is a little bit bizarre.
Yeah, it is different for sure. And this, what you're referring to, human connection and human text. So it's quite funny because last year, I remember I came to the conference and I sit down in the bus to go to some side event at South Summit, and like next to me was Jack. And I was like, hey, you're Jack from Oyster. And he was like, yes. And wait a minute. And we literally had a podcast conversation like a month ago or 2 months ago with him. And then we're like, oh, so we're meeting now in person. And that was like so different because you also remember people different way when you meet in person. You remember, how they make you feel. You remember what kind of energy they brought and what's the vibe. Then I don't know, like, oh, what's the habit of the hand gestures, anything. So I always
Yeah.
think like human thirst is something we should sometimes push for. Like you mentioned
Yeah.
about the gym, rather than keep ourselves isolated. Because then, I don't know, the world will literally go nuts without the connection.
I think that's right. I mean, so much I think of what people are willing to do to each other and yell at each other, and these ridiculous dialogues that people have comes because people are so passive aggressive when they're just interacting online, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
and this is true, right? This is not just me saying this. Like there's research that backs this up. Like people say the most absurd things that they would never say to someone next to them, right? Because they're the way that they were brought up, or maybe they're too afraid or whatever. Now some people will be like, well, that's good, right? Then you're being authentic. Like, no, you're not being authentic. You're giving your license to be an asshole, right? That's not cool, right? Like people just giving themselves a license to just say whatever the hell is in their head. Like you should never do that, right? We say this to my kids. I mean, both of my kids are special needs, my autism, and it's like, don't say what you're thinking in every case. Like that's a really good way to have no friends, right? Because unfortunately, like we think of crazy stuff all the times, and you don't mean it. It's just like your brain just goes all over and says all sorts of crazy stuff, but just don't say it, right? But now people online are just saying all sorts of crap, and like they're talking also, and and then they act like in these ways that they would never act to a fellow human if they actually even met them once. Right. And so so
Yeah,
much I think life needs to be about this. And especially as we have more AI right now, you don't even know if it's a human on the other side. Like, oh my God, it's ridiculous.
it is. It's like, it's scary, to be honest. I was testing AI tools to do some voiceovers, and it's
Mm.
getting better and better, and it's becoming really difficult to recognize. Even they are able now to replicate my accent. I'm like, "Phew, that's
That's
dangerous."
crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like it. Anyway, but whom are you talking with your book? Who is your ideal reader and buyer who should get a book and would
Yeah.
learn the most?
I mean, my book is basically structured for anyone who, that's why I call AI curious, that may be using AI to some extent, but they think that they can do more with it, right? So, my typical, defined reader is someone who says, look, I use AI, but they don't really, and they really can't admit to someone else that they want to be able to learn to use how, in a way that's more effective than, say, Google, right? It's, I actually start off a lot of my talks, at least that are kind of free format, with asking people, how many are using AI? And of course, almost no one was admit basically that they don't want, unless they're really like anti like AI, like, oh, I don't use AI. But almost everyone's like, okay, I use AI. Okay, great. And then it's about how you use AI that matters, right? And so that age wise, obviously it's targeting a little bit of an older reader, because again, I think younger readers aren't going to a book to get their information, right? But still, if you're now kind of 30, 40, 50, and you're looking at someone who is starting to be in their career, certainly, right? And is looking for an understanding of like how I can use AI again personally. How can I use it to make myself better, right? And the reason the title is the title is that prior to AI, or prior to kind of the modern era or whatever, right? We were dealing with the fact that our memories and our ability and our speed got slower as we got older, but at the same time, we're basically getting better at thinking strategically, because you're able to have better judgment, better pattern recognition. There's actual neuroscience that backs this up. Like your neurons actually change as you observe things, so that when you see them again, you become faster at saying, look, I've seen this again, right? And so being able to see what happens afterwards, right, is judgment or is strategic thinking, right? And so the ability of those two different curves to kind of peak for a limited amount of time is why most people have a peak of their career between, like, say, 35 and 55, right? And that has been, traditional, if you will, right, over the last, say, 100 years in terms of like the modern workforce. So the reason I say ageless is now using AI, you can back that up. So again, for the people that are seeing this, that are feeling this, that want to be able to do more, that's really the audience. And then some people go, oh, well, what about younger people? Am I ignoring younger people? I'm not ignoring younger people at all, because so much of the techniques I talk about in this book are really structured ways in which you can use AI, right? We make an assumption that younger people are AI native, and to some extent they are, right? They just use it, right? They only think about it like, oh, just like you use cell phones, like just use it. It's there, I'm using it. Okay, great. But in terms of how like you structured you need to use it, I mean, I think younger people also need a framework, and that's what the book offers, right? It gives you a principles, it gives you understanding, a framework for how to use AI. You may already be doing the things that it says, but trying to get that clear in your mind of why you do it and how you can sustainably do it that way. So that's part of the whole appeal of the book, I hope.
Okay, amazing. And you are right now on the book tour, right? In
Yeah.
Europe, also you have some local events. So how do you choose the events, and how did the distribution and promotion strategy evolve now since your first books?
Yeah. Well, the first book I released during COVID, so my book tour was all this, right? So that kind of answers that, right? It's interesting because we publish this ourselves. We publish our own books, and so we don't have a PR person or something doing this, so it's all me and all us, I should say, and but it's mostly me in terms of like figuring out what I want to do, where and why, as we discussed, right? The scheduling can be kind of painful, but the interestingly enough, as I was saying to you earlier, I live right by New York City, right? Like I'm in Connecticut, right to the New York City suburbs. So, in an hour I can get to the city. So, I could go every day to a conference of like a lot of people of a reasonable size in New York City every day, guaranteed. I don't even need to know this, right? Every day there's something going on, but it's New York, and in New York, it's everything is much more intense. Everything is in an ecosystem that I would say is less caring about someone coming into it with something new, right? If you're already somewhere in New York and you're great and you're doing, it's fine. If you know exactly what you want, you can do that too. If you're me and I'm looking for stages where there's a lot more discovery, right? Where there's a lot more kind of serendipity, right? Meeting yourself, meeting other speakers, meeting other people that are on stages, right? A lot of that kind of serendipitous stuff doesn't really happen in New York. New York is like the king of transactionality, right? So if you want it, go get it, right? And that's fine. It's here, right? But I find so much more value in the either smaller gatherings like I just did last night, which is out here in Connecticut, and I do a bunch of those, or at least for my bigger conferences, I'd rather not go to a big New York City conference, and I'd rather go to conferences around the world where specifically, because I think this applies a lot to startups and applies a lot to people who are entrepreneurs, applies to people who are basically leaders in their own right, who have a lot of autonomy or who want to have a lot of autonomy, right? As well as corporations that are thinking in that way more innovatively, right? And I just see so much more of that outside of where I live right now. Someone listening to this may be like, "Oh, you're out of your mind." I mean, there's so many good things in New York. I'm not saying they're not, right? I also like traveling to interesting places, so there's that. But yes, so as part of this, I've been to Brazil, I've been to Argentina, I've been to Madrid, I've been to Italy. I know I'm saying countries and cities at the same time. And more to come, right? And that's, to me, I think where the book is going to be more receptive. I think there's more people using the AI tools that could use its help. And maybe perhaps that people that can admit that they need the help, which again, people in New York probably don't, right? They're just like, come on, man, I don't need to worry about this. Tell me how I'm going to make $1 billion in 3 days. I mean, that's that, right? I'll go see you talk about that book. You want to talk about human crap? Like that's not in America, or that's certainly not New York. Go to California or whatever, right?
Okay, thank you for sharing. So, for someone who is listening right now to us, and as you mentioned, is using AI, but to that very entry level and not really either optimizing or actually co-creating together, what would be the first step to start filtering the information available online and making first moves?
Yeah. So I think obviously the first step is to go buy my book,
Get a
or at
book.
least get the book, right? Or you can find my writings and my my podcasts or my videos. They're all free, right? So you can get a taste for it. If you like it, then you can go buy the book, right? But honestly, though, I think a lot of this is, we talked about tools earlier, right? We talked about how everyone has so many different tools. I think the first thing is really a mental thing. Like, get yourself in the right head state, which is to understand this. First of all, it's really early, right? So everyone wants to make you feel like there's so much FOMO, that you're missing out, that you're not doing right. That's not true, right? So again, the people who've been thinking about this the most have only been thinking about it for a couple of years, right? The people who run these damn companies, and even the people who are, the heads of technology or whatever, who are writing and creating this technology, they don't really understand everything it does. They certainly can't understand everything it could do, right? So you're early, right? And so that's fine. There's plenty of time. So, kind of take your head down, relaxed, and be like, listen, I can catch up, right? That's the first thing. And that requires a certain bit of humility with getting that mindset. So this mindset thing, I think, is more important than anything else, right? Which is you're not behind as long as you approach it with humility and then be open-minded to the things that it can do for you, right? So again, a lot of people will say, oh, I use AI, and they'll be like, check the box, it's good, right? And that's not, of course, the point. The point is really trying to say, look, I am open to the idea that I could do better. I could perform better in my day-to-day life, whether that's scheduling, whether that's writing, whether that's reading, whether that's, optimizing my time, as we talked about, like all these different things that you could do together with AI and these kinds of techniques, and be open-minded to that, and then say, okay, now, like, okay, what can I do to make that better? And I think what people fall into the trap, and of course they do because of marketing, is they say, well, now I need to get the right tool, right? And I'll tell you, that's, I think, a mistake. The tool is really not that important, right? Now, yes, I've got a bunch of different tools and these kinds of things like that. But when you're starting, it doesn't matter, right? And there's a privacy concern, so keep that in mind. But other than that, like, don't tell all sorts of crazy intimate stuff because it's training on your data, and then it can go use that data later on, right? That's what happens when you use the free versions of most of these tools, or all of these tools, I should say. So privacy aside, don't get too hung up about what tool you may be using or not using, right? Go get one of these general purpose LLMs, right? Whether it's Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever, even Copilot, although I think that's much worse. Doesn't matter. Like whatever you can get your hands on, right? And start playing with it, right? Start using it, and then don't worry too much about making the right choice. You can always switch, not a big deal, right? The important part is then thinking about your day-to-day life and day-to-day workflow, right? And I think that's, again, the part that a lot of people are missing. They either jump too quickly into doing this and saying, oh man, this is great, like go write this paper for me, and then they get themselves into trouble, right? Or whatever. And think about more of like, look, what's part of my day-to-day workflow? What part of my day-to-day workflow could I make much better, faster, more optimized, right? And just start with that. Start with something small, right? Start with something like writing or reading emails, which everyone does, right? And even younger people, as much as they might hate email, once you start entering the workplace, you got to go use your email, right? So they might hate doing it, but use AI to help read your emails each day, right? Or at least tell you which ones they need to pay more attention to, or help you do some research, right? When you need to write back and do these kinds of things. Start thinking about these kind of smaller tasks of your day-to-day workflow, and then just walk it through there. So that's basically my process for kind of getting bootstrapped up.
That's a great process. So, Ted, where can people find more information about you? Where can they buy your book? We will leave the links in the show notes, but maybe you can see the go-to channels to follow you and love you.
Yeah, everywhere, right? So Ageless Peak Performance is the book. So agelesspeakperformance.com, right, is the book site. That has links to everything. So from there you can find my socials, you can find everything. You can find excerpts for the book, you can find, all sorts of different things that you can learn from there. So that's the base place that you can go. Of course, you can also go to Amazon and just type in the title. Anything like that will get you to me. Don't type in my name, because of course if you type in Yang, you get tons of stuff, right? So it's kind of funny, but like, I think if you type in Ted Yang, you will get me somewhere on the page, but you also get all these other people. So that's the weird part of being like, it's actually very strange, because Ted it's not that unique a name, but it's actually more unique than Yang, right? I meet many more Yangs than I meet Teds, right? So go figure.
Oh my God,
But
I didn't know that.
yeah, of course, right? I mean, it's just one of these names that's a little bit older, right? And I do. So when I meet a Ted, I usually it's very rare when I meet a younger, like a Ted my age or younger. Like I meet a Ted, the person's like 70, right? Like, oh yes, I'm Ted, and it's like, okay, but I don't meet that many Teds, but there are quite a lot of Yangs out there. So there you go. Anyway, the point is, you can find me on the book site. So agelesspeakperformance.com. If you're already convinced to go buy the book, don't let me stop you. Go to Amazon, just click yes, buy it now, go ebook, print, do your thing. But honestly, you can find a lot more about me on LinkedIn or on any of the socials.
Awesome, Ted. We're going to put all the links in the show notes. And I think I'm just saying thank you for coming and sharing that using AI can be actually can become also more soulful part of a life. And it's not that from eliminating everything, it's just making it easier. And I hope everyone got inspired, and good luck with your book tour. I hope it's going to be fun, and will keep you energized.
Yeah, no, it will. A little time to recharge, but then I'm back in Europe in a couple of weeks, of course.
Yeah,
And so
what's your
I'm
next
sure I'll see you
stop?
somewhere.
Yeah, 100%. What's your next stop in Europe?
So actually, the next stop in Europe is all personal stuff. So thank God.
Okay.
So the
Okay,
next,
we're not
yeah,
gonna disclose
yeah.
that, guys. Sorry.
No, 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 it's fine. It's fine. I don't care. Like these are big countries, right? So, but no, I'm going to the Netherlands and then Ireland and then Italy. So
Wow.
I'm actually Italian. I don't know if you pointed this out to you before, right? But
Ooh, not
I'm
really.
an Italian citizen. Yeah, well, this is actually covered in the book because my wife is Italian, right? So myself and my children were all Italian citizens. So we go to Europe every summer, right? So this is just part of that. But I do have some book stuff put in there, but the initial parts are just for us. We're just gonna
Okay,
travel,
amazing.
spend some time with my
So,
family.
so make sure you share on LinkedIn and online, and then everyone who wants to maybe meet you on the tour will find you there and
There we
enjoy
go.
the
That'd be
summer
great.
and enjoy the tour. And thank you, everyone who joined us today. See you next week.
All right, take care.